All right. We're live. All right. All you freedom loving boys and girls, men and women, welcome to Mission Critical Podcast. If you are watching or listening to this podcast, you are the resistance. We're in season 2. We're calling it season 2. This is our 50th episode. So if you join us tonight, awesome. 50th episode under the belt. Took us 47 episodes to figure out how we wanted to do this, but here we are.
Only 47.
Yeah, only 47. We're starting off Liberty Week. So season 2, we're kicking it right off where we should have started, which is Liberty Week. This is part 1 of Liberty Week. Redbeard, if you would be so kind, just remind everybody what Liberty Week means, what it's all about, and then we'll bring on our esteemed and honored guest for the night and dive right in with both feet.
Yeah. So Liberty Week takes a liberty-oriented perspective at issues predominantly in the domestic sphere, but also in the foreign sphere as it pertains to the conversation. We evaluate different goings-on and issues and judge them whether or not they stand to the litmus test of liberty and as it pertains to our Constitution. And like I said, that can involve foreign issues as well, but it is going to be predominantly a domestically centered conversation as it pertains to the United States respectively and our states here. So
rock and or roll. All right. Hey, and as everybody's noticed, we're different. So Jeremy's over there tonight where I usually sit. I don't know how he managed that, tricky little bastard with his red beard. And then, but down below us in our musical chairs, he's been on the show many times. We love him.
The
only Patrick. From SpongeBob, not to be
Patrick Star.
Yeah, not to be confused with Patrick from SpongeBob. Welcome, sir. But as always, if you don't mind, just give everybody a quick little background. Tell everybody just a little bit about yourself, whatever you're willing to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks for having me. Let's see. I've got a long career, both military. Started back in the Marine Corps back in the 80s. Wound my way into the Army side of the house back in the 90s. Became a police officer. 9/11 happened, went back on the military side. That's where I met Mark. Ended up winding my way to the CIA, where I met Mark again. Then we just kind of carried on the friendship since there. And I still work in Homeland Security realm, and on the intel side as well. So, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
All right. Good to go. Good to go. Redbeard, maybe later this week or the week after, we'll have to kind of just tell everybody a little bit about us here. We haven't done that in a while. And if you're new to the program, you might be like, well, who the hell are these two knuckleheads and why does it matter? Well, it kind of doesn't. We're just people like you. Put our pants on just like everyone else, right? Might have some backgrounds and experiences that might be worth, but more importantly, we kind of going in with the be the difference. Jeremy and I one day just said we can't sit back anymore. I will, like the dude, I will not abide, right? The dude does not abide anymore, for me, part of that actually happened years ago and kind of got me a little bit of trouble on my business side, Centerline Systems. I started talking about the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. That's where I started getting a little political on my business side, but that's kind of led us to where we are here. And I think, if you guys have watched us, and been with us during this process, it's just like anything else. It's learning curves, Jeremy and I and Patrick and every one of our guests that we all have lives, we have businesses, families, all these things. We're figuring it out as we go. And hopefully you are too, right? And hopefully this is just one of the stepping stones or islands that you land on in your struggle to be a better person, to be a defender of freedom and X, Y, and Z. I won't go into too long of a tirade there because I'm already starting to go into our intro for tonight's live stream. So I'm going to share just a couple little things. And then you might be saying, because you've noted, if you've watched before, you like Patrick always comes on for like the more military espionage, spy stuff, that's their background. Oh, contraire, mon frere. Just hang on. This is Liberty Week. And it's very important that we have other voices like Patrick's asking questions and talking about this. So let me go into a little present here on a little sharing screen. And Redbeard, with your permission, I'm going to start out with I'm going to save that. I was going to start out with Minnesota and that 4071 bill. I'm going to hold on to that just for a quick second. I'm going to go to this right here, and I'll come back over. Well, I can't. You guys, I can't see you anymore. I'm just looking at the article. But here's where we're going to start, and I think I just wanted to jump right into this. So now. Oh, and by the way, and I apologize. I'll get my shit together here. So this is the 4-year anniversary of the recent unpleasantness, whatever you want to call that bullshit, that has assaulted us as a nation of values, that a nation that follows constitutional law. That started 4 years ago. Well, kind of. It technically was before then, but it became official 4 years ago. So we're in that zone. And then I'm using that as a backdrop for this article right here. So now in New York City, and you can make arguments, maybe it wasn't their policies, maybe the policies didn't fail, but this, that, or whatever the other excuse is. But now we have these issues in New York City. And it appears that the response here is, well, let's muster or I can't think of the word all of a sudden. Patrick, help me out. Let's not motivate. What am I thinking of here? Let's call up the National Guard.
Yeah.
Patrick will say
activate.
Yeah, activate. Yeah. I was thinking of muster and motivate, activate. But let's activate the National Guard. Let's call them up and let's have them post up in our subways because there's been a lot of crime. So the solution isn't trying to address why there's been a lot of crime and what your policies or your vision of policing has done to allow that. Instead, your response to this is to activate the National Guard, to call up the National Guard. And then this is why Patrick being here should start making a little sense. And now that we're going to have the National Guard, the citizen soldiers of New York, in our subways doing what? Right? And that's the question, right? So they're now patrolling in the subways. They're doing bag checks, surveillance of all passengers. And as this title says, no legislation, no debate, just an edict from the mayor. Well, and in this case, also from the governor. So I'm going to come back over to you guys so I can see you. I'm going to stop sharing that. I think, people can go read the article, but that is kind of our nexus. That's our point of intersection into tonight's podcast for Liberty Week. Patrick, I really just kind of almost want to turn this over to you immediately, but through protocol, I got to give Redbeard at least a comment or a thought if he wants to add into it, because that's what, hang on a second. I mean, this is going to open up so many questions. What title are they under? Are they operating under? Are they even authorized? Is this constitutional? Does this fly in the face of liberty? Let's come over to Redbeard here first. We're just getting, my screen is being really weird here tonight, guys. All right, there you go. Redbeard, we're going to come down to Patrick because I want to ask some very specific military kind of related questions, pertaining to the National Guard, Title 10, Title 30, Title 40, Title 50, Title 20 or 22 maybe in this case. But your thoughts of this from a liberty perspective. We've got the National Guard who's been mobilized. They're now actively patrolling the New York subway systems. And doing what specifically, and under what auspice or legal? What are your thoughts on that before we come into Patrick, where we start dissecting this beast?
Well, I think that there's obviously the questions that we talked about. Okay, so what's the reasoning? What's the rationale? Show us, like you were talking about, the title. Show us all of these different things from a legal standpoint, but we also have to consider the fact too that they're going to twist and turn and utilize whatever excuse it is they can to even bypass what would be considered legal precedents or legal rationale or reasoning to do something like this. I mean, how many times have we seen the National Guard utilized in ways that are kind of really unbecoming of their whole purpose? We've talked about several different things previously, but I mean, when you look at this in particular, I mean, this is what is the purpose? I mean, they say it's to stem the flow of crime or to stem the tide of crime, but I have a hard time believing that. If you're that worried about it, then maybe you should do things to actually affect the criminal behavior from a police perspective. but you're not doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. So now you have to bring the military in. I mean, there's a lot of problems here as it pertains to liberty. You know, it should be the last measure that you go to have to bring in any form of military to even remotely be on your streets. That takes a very drastic situation, and I just don't see it. I don't see it. I don't see the rationale, I guess, liberty or otherwise.
So this isn't, I'm not trying to take a point of privilege. This actually feeds to the argument we're trying to make here. So no, this guy right here, that little stupid thing that's behind me, that's an award for, and I was in the National Guard, right? So this is, again, this isn't a look at me. This applies in so many other people, and hopefully not the same type of circumstances, but I was in New York City for 9/11. I was waiting to transition into the active duty SF. And then this happened. I had been drilling with a unit that I think is off of like 98th and Park off the top of my head. I think that's where they were, because I knew it was going to be a month or two. So I still had to maintain my UDAs, right? My good time, my weekend stuff. The moment that happened, I moved down there, and then me and a handful of other people who just came into that National Guard center, and then we just started doing stuff right then and there. So Patrick, huge difference in and the reason I'm bringing up to Redbeard's point, that's natural disasters. This was an act of terrorism, but it falls in that same type of category, right? This is like, we have resources, we have capabilities. There's a lot of things that we can do that augment law enforcement.
Yeah.
The political side of it, but I'm really thinking like the law enforcement, EMS, firefighter side. There's a lot of ways that we can assist them under those type of circumstances and crises. But once you get into like, so Minnesota National Guard has been mobilized in the past for riots, like the Hormel plant riot, right? But, at these points, we get into this area where a lot of people may not understand, Patrick, like every branch of the military, National Guard, active duty, and then us in the agency, there's things called titles. And the point here isn't to to illustrate, well, Title 10 does this, Title 42 does, that's not the issue. It has to do with the legality of it. So under these circumstances, Patrick, and I try to anchor this for a reason with the whole 4 years ago, the bullshit kind of started, and look what that got us. People did the same thing without any type of, as that article said, without any type of edict, vote. We just declare it, ipso facto, there it is. So it shall be written, so shall be done. Patrick, from a military perspective, what concerns do you have on this? And then also, because you're former law enforcement as well, and you're a smart mofo, does this even make any sense? Maybe we should start there. Does this make sense? And if your answer is yes, explain to everybody, and to myself included, how. And if it doesn't make sense, can you break that apart from your incredibly rational and experienced background for us, sir?
Well, I'll give it a shot. This is a lot to chew on too.
Yeah,
so
it is.
If you take a look at the National Guard in and of itself, I don't know that the general public realizes that they belong to the state. So I met Mark when we were in the Illinois Army National Guard, and there's two branches that have National Guard elements. It's Army and Air Force. Marine Corps and Navy don't have that. So when you take your oath, you take the oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, but you also take an oath to follow the orders of those appointed above you, including in our case the governor and everybody that is in the National Guard. That's done under what's called Title 23. I think it's 18 Code Title 23. So again, for those that haven't ever served in the military or been around the military very much, there has to be an authorization that allows the military to even take on a mission. So if you're, a military officer and you get, tasked with a mission, one of your first questions should be, hey, what authorities do we have, and what are we conducting this under? Usually,
just a quick time out, because you just said it. We say titles because we were in through a bunch of those different worlds, but that really that word means authority, right? It's an authority, really.
Yeah, it's the legal statute that gives you the authority to conduct whatever mission you're going to conduct. Now, with that, with Title 23, which is what the National Guard is under, that's within the states, and taking that oath to the governor, you can actually have troops within that state acting in support of, and that's a key phrase right there, in support of law enforcement operations. Many states, especially the larger ones with big cities, have a counter drug program, where if they're on the border, they have a counter drug program that allows soldiers and airmen to support law enforcement agencies through like intelligence analysis. And that doesn't mean, that's a tricky one too. That doesn't mean, U.S. intelligence is being shared. It just means that they can support them collecting law enforcement intelligence on criminal acts and that type of thing. They also have usually like an air program for, rotary wing or helicopters that can fly surveillance support and that type of thing. So,
and that's unfortunately what
aware of that.
That was exactly what unfortunately happened with that helo that just went down in Texas. Yep. So
and it had a border patrol agent on it. So so that's just an example of how the National Guard in states can be utilized for law enforcement purposes. Now, what's happening in New York? I think that's within their authority to do. The question becomes, and I don't know what's actually happening on the ground. I'm not there. You only see limited stuff on the news, but I think that they're supposed to only be there in the context of supporting law enforcement, the NYPD, and I also understand that New York State Police has been deployed as well into the subways in New York. So now the question becomes, what law enforcement activity are you supporting? Because now that you're in that role, you still have to follow the legal bounds of a law enforcement agent, right? You have to act under that person's authority. Now, if that person decides, that officer, trooper, whatever, decides, hey, I want to start searching bags and I want to check everybody in here because I've got the military with me, because they don't understand the authorities the military is under, that's where things have the potential to get really, really sideways quick. And when I say that, I mean people's rights are going to be violated when that's not the purpose of the whole thing. So there's always a slippery slope with that. And it requires and demands like very strict oversight by both law enforcement and military commanders in these types of operations. And
so and that's a great point. I want to bring the article back up because you just kind of nailed it. And, and I don't know if you saw that in the notes, but that again, just to highlight this is so, Patrick's spent a long time in the military, active duty, National Guard, technically kind of reserves too, right? Or is that, okay. Yep. Same with me, active duty, reserves, and then National Guard. That was kind of how it went for me. But on his point, so I've done a number, like, so that other little stupid thing, and I've done this before. That's me with like $56 million of cocaine, doing a JTF mission, a joint task force mission. So again, to what Patrick just said, depending on the authority, the title, how we're operating, how you're mobilized, these things it's fine. And it's in a good use of the resources. I actually think those JTF missions should happen all the time. We were a light infantry unit. We had all the skill set and the tools to go and provide, like basically not overwatch from like a support by fire type of, we weren't there, although we were armed to defend ourselves and we were legally authorized to use deadly force to defend ourselves. Because you are talking about real no shit drug, guys here. They're going to kill you to get away, possibly if they detect you. But we had that authorization to be there in a surveillance and overwatch type of, capacity. National Guard's been called up to help local law enforcement and state level, entities, suppress riots. National Guard's been called up in our unfortunate past to suppress riots to the extent of shooting peaceful protesters. So there's all kinds of, we have a history of this. Everybody should be wary. That's my big point. And I'm also trying to highlight, to Patrick and everybody else, but background to Patrick's point. How is this being done? How is it being executed? What are the second and third order effects, especially when it comes to our liberty? And then on that note, Patrick, because you just got us all you got me thinking about it. So I'm going to share the screen one more time because there's a great point that you were just saying. So this is Oh, sorry, wrong screen. Sorry, boys and girls. That is what we used to call that in the military. That's my personal headspace and timing. That was responsible for that right there. Where in the hell did it go? Here we go. Got it. So Redbeard, just for your future knowledge, again, they were all in order, and then I clicked on one and it changed the whole damn order. So that's
sounds about right.
Yeah.
Pretty par for the course.
So here's to Patrick's point. We'll bring it back to Patrick, and I want everyone, whether you watch this with us live or you watch this at a later time, this is what I'm going to focus on, right? Is right here. This. And, for people who are listening, I'm referencing an article that's over on Zero Hedge. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it basically states, hey, this started 4 years ago this month with lockdowns. That's what shattered the capacity of civil society to function in the United States. Everything that has happened since follows like one domino tumbling after another. Guess I am going to read it. It goes like this: lockdown, loss of moral compass and spreading of loneliness and nihilism, rioting resulting from citizen frustration, police absent because of ideological hectoring, a rise in uncontrolled immigration and refugees, an epidemic of ill health of substance abuse and otherwise. Businesses flee a city, cities fall into decay, and that results in more surveillance and police state. The 10th stage is the sacking of liberty and civilization itself. Now, that might seem like extreme language to some people, but I challenge you, look back over the last 4 years and ask yourself, did we not see those events happen? Maybe the timeline wasn't the same, 3 was 7 and 7 was 4 type of crap. But Patrick, to your point, what can we anticipate if the National Guard leadership of New York, I pause intentionally, if they don't, how are they mitigating this right now? Think about our op orders. You had to do that consequence management, crisis, that mitigation, paragraph 6, I think it eventually became. What are they doing to mitigate this? And then Redbeard, and I'm bringing this over to you, so it's a two-part. Look, coming to Patrick and then you. And more importantly, and maybe Patrick can help us answer this, is it even lawful? Is it even constitutional? Period. Why in the hell? You're just a person going about your day, getting on the subway to go to wherever you want to go, uptown, downtown, wherever you're going. And now you're being subjected to a search. There's no probable cause for your search other than that you're riding the subway. Is the argument that, hey, just like going into a stadium, you're going to be subjected to some type of search? Well, a stadium isn't a public venue, right? That's a it's not even privately owned. We the taxpayers pay for most of that shit. How come we don't get dividend checks? But seriously, we all get suckered into buying some rich, guy a new stadium, and they get all the profit and we don't. All right, Mike D's bringing up the Fourth Amendment. That's exactly where I'm going. This, Mike, is exactly that. So constitutionally, common sense wise, and then Patrick, to your point, as well as I do, most cops aren't even properly trained. National Guardsmen, who are combat infantry or transportation or whatever their job is, and now we're asking them to go do this type of test. So multiple levels here for both of you guys. This is a agree, disagree, and take it where you want to go. Let's come to Patrick first.
Okay, so the first thing I just addressed, like the authorities of getting, soldiers and airmen there, not even, counting what they're doing. So that's a great point. Is what are they doing when they're there? They still have to conduct lawful support to or support to lawful law enforcement operations. That Mike D put in Fourth Amendment. Yeah, that's right. Like, are you going to conduct what's referred to as a Terry stop, basically patting people down and checking their stuff when, you don't have the authority to do that in a public way? So that's where things get questionable. The other thing that concerns me, and I'll go back a second. So when I was a Marine back in the 80s, we went into the 90s, I was getting ready to exit the Marine Corps and kind of go into the college world. We got called up to Los Angeles for the Rodney King riots, the LA riots in 1992. I was an active duty Marine. I was there with an active duty unit that just came back from Gulf War I with, tactical vehicles. And we didn't have any arms. We were completely unarmed. It was what I refer to as a scarecrow operation. We were just there as a show of force Not that we had any force to deliver, but nonetheless, the public doesn't know that. And, if you start looking at use of force for law enforcement, or, the government doesn't really look at it this way, but they should, your presence is a use of force, right? So that was a little concerning. Now, the question becomes also, what would have happened? Because that applies here in New York now today. What happens if one of the people in the subway realizes, hey, these National Guard folks aren't armed. Let's cause damage to them. Let's shoot them, stab them, or whatever. Now, what's going to happen? Is that going to ratchet the tension up? And are they going to authorize the use of firearms? And now you've got a bunch of untrained soldiers and airmen that are going to be bearing firearms against the citizenry there. Now, that's not legal. So, but these are domino effects that we have to keep an eye on, and if we don't question them and address them, that's not really American, right? That's what we should be doing.
And before Redbeard, you respond, and Patrick, I didn't mean to kind of cut you off, but it's not that they're untrained; it's that they're trained in completely different environments and operational considerations.
Yep.
Great, you've been downrange and you've been kicking in doors, through your career. When I was teaching, just personal defense, permit to carry stuff, your downrange experiences, lock and load and going out the wire and then doing a patrol, that is not the same as you going to the grocery store. A completely different set. Like, you have rules of engagement. Here we have these things called laws, and the overarching laws, the Constitution, you have to act with underneath that umbrella and within that domain. I hate to say it, and I know somebody's going to pick on me, like combat isn't easy. I don't mean to say combat's easy. Don't take my words out of context. I'm just saying it's much simpler when the rule. Like, I'm going out the wire, I'm going to lock and load. Here's my ROE, and this is what's going to happen if somebody tries to break my shit, right? That's not the same thing as I'm driving down the road and I'm trying to go to the grocery store and then X happens or Y happens or Z happens. It's a completely different set of litigious, but whatever. But part of that's our Constitution. So, Patrick, I just wanted to throw that out there because I thought you made a great point, but I don't want to disparage They just have I guess what I'm trying to say is they have a completely different set of training that might and most likely doesn't apply. It is the wrong tool for the task at hand. I'll leave it to you to respond to me, agree, disagree, and then we'll come over to Patrick. God dang, stupid nose over there on the screen.
Yeah. Well, no, I agree with you 100%. And because, if you think about it, I mean, any type of quasi law enforcement training I did when we were on the National Guard side was riot control. They break out the shields and the batons and put the helmets on to keep people out of certain areas. And that's pretty much it. Now, if things get ratcheted up and, firearms make their presence, that changes the dynamic greatly. And I can tell you firsthand, sadly, a lot of National Guard members don't know how to utilize firearms effectively. And it also depends on what kind of units are they sending there to do that. Generally, it's infantry and some support, MOSs or jobs. And we're talking folks like, truck drivers and logistics people and stuff like that. Those who will say, hey, yeah, I'll go ahead and go for that, because how this works is there's a call up and the first people that respond are usually the ones that go. Now, sometimes in those numbers coming from the intel side, some of those people will roger up and say, hey, I want to go do that. Well, now you've got an intelligence person used to work against the public too. There's laws against that too, as far as what they're doing. It's a very slippery slope. And if I were in charge of the New York, National Guard, I would have my public affairs people out there daily talking about, what our folks are there to do and what they're not there to do.
Well, yeah. And legal would have to be all over this. Yeah. And so to that point right there, there's probably someone saying, well, of course, Mark, Patrick, Redbeard, they didn't just do this. Of course, they consulted all the legal side and they looked at this. And to that, I'm just going to say, really? Do you really believe that? I mean, and if you do, you hear me say it, I've got a bridge to nowhere. And Patrick can attest to this. I mean, Redbeard can attest to this in the civilian world, but I'm here to tell you, and all those cool guy, top notch, man, there's shit that goes on where you would have thought that, and that's not the case at all. That's not how this works more often than not, unfortunately. So, where people just do shit and without damn the consequences. And sometimes they get lucky and it works out, and sometimes people die. So, shit happens. We'll see we'll see if this is going to be a shit happens sandwich. But bringing it over to Redbeard real quickly, my major concern here it isn't that the National Guard, the men and women who volunteered to serve in the National Guard try to serve their community. It's not that they are being called out to deal with a situation in within the contiguous limits of their state. It's not that. Again, that's a different title or authorization. You get deployed to go do something else. It's a different title, different authorization. It's not the issue there. It's what I'm trying to get out of Patrick is it the right tool for the job? Are they even properly trained? And then where I'm kind of, Patrick and I have been dancing around, Redbeard, and I'll come to you. Is this even constitutional? How, under what? And Patrick, I guess I will come back to you. I'll feed it over to Redbeard. At what point can a National Guard soldier, Redbeard, do you think, stop you, detain you, and then search you? When do you think that's actually even feasibly, legally, constitutionally correct, Redbeard?
Well, I might have an answer for you.
Right.
Might be a little extended, but it merits the extension. So first off, I want to go and I want to read something, and then I will follow it up with another section of the Constitution. Again, founders' words, not mine. I'm not just putting conjecture out there. So the Second Amendment, which we all love and know, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Very specific wording. Legally, very specific wording, right? Now, why did I read that first? Because to a lot of people, the National Guard of the states is considered to be the militia. For a lot of people, in its contemporary form, it's considered to be the prepared, maintained militia. Now, why do I say that? Because when you look at Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 8, Congress has the ability to, and I'll get to this, to the more of the militia part, but Congress has the ability to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for longer term than 2 years, to provide and maintain a navy, to make the rules for government and regulation of the land and naval forces, and to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, to provide for organizing, arming, disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states, respectively, the appointment of officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. Now, why is this important? Because if we're going to evaluate this in a constitutional sense, are we actually regarding the National Guard as the militia? If so, I would like to ask a question here. Under our Constitution, and mind you, there may be areas within the state constitutions that may or may not allow for certain things, but under the federal Constitution, if we are going to regard the National Guard as the militia outside of the people, obviously, then I would like to know, obviously we're not under threat of invasion in this particular case, but are they construing the crime as an insurrection? That's right here is the only conceivable thing for why we would use the National Guard domestically. Do we have an insurrection? It's their words, not mine. So unless there's something within the state specifically that says otherwise specific to that state, are they being employed in a way or manner that is constitutionally defined? I would argue no. There's been no call for an insurrection. There's been no call for anything of the sorts. We haven't labeled criminals as insurrectionists. We haven't done anything to overwhelmingly label this criminal element, which they still have yet to define. I would like to know exactly what they construe as a criminal element. Does walking your dog or going to work make you a criminal? Constitutionally, this doesn't make any sense at all. They've given no reason, no definition, no form whatsoever. If we're going to construe the National Guard as the militia, it does not fall within the parameters specified by the federal Constitution. Again, I want to end this just saying, if the state has an amendment that allows for other extenuating circumstances, then that needs to be brought. They need to say that. They have to specifically say that yes, the New York Constitution allows for the deployment of this. It has to be specific. Everything else.
And in today's day and age, Redbeard, with this social media, again, this tool, this can be used for good. Why wouldn't you get ahead of that on the PR side and just come out and say it? You know, why wouldn't you do that?
Yep. Like it's one of those things, like, guys, like, I didn't write this. This isn't my conjecture. This isn't anecdotal evidence that I'm trying to bring light to. This is literally the founding fathers' words as it pertains to what the militia is supposed to be. And if we are considering the National Guard as a more permanent wing of the militia, then they need to fall under those guidelines. If there's no insurrection or domestic issues that require the deployment of National Guard, they should not legally be there.
And if the National Guard does not fall into that realm that you're talking about, Redbeard, then it's got to fall into it. It's the, you know, it's the cousin or the stepson of the active duty. And then that goes into what Patrick and I were talking about, titles and authorities then we have
bigger problems because
exactly. And then
so I kind of want them to fall under that.
Sorry, I was talking over your.
No, that's okay. I was
talking over Redbeard. Let's just Redbeard say it again. I talked over you.
Yeah, no, I just was saying, like, I kind of, if they don't fall under that, I'm very worried, because that opens up a huge issue. If they do fall under it, I'd kind of be a little happier, because then we can start to, like, address these issues. But if they don't, dude, you're admitting that these people are not considered the militia. So that, to me, and I could be wrong, but to me, what they're saying at that point, if that's the case, is they're the equivalent of active service. So if that's the equivalency that they're shooting for instead of the militia, then we have a huge problem, because now you're deploying troops on American soil to deal with American citizens. And this is why we need to have.
So slow down. So right there, that I just want to make sure that was what you're saying.
No, I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, and that's where I stepped over you, because then I mentioned posse comitatus, and without getting into that, but bring it down to Patrick. It's, as far as I can see, you've got like 4 different options here. You can agree, disagree if you want to go down that route. You can add to, or you can just start talking to us about some other crazy wazoo shit, because this stuff is like, what the hell is going on in the world?
I told you it was a slippery slope, and so Redbeard. I mean, that kind of illustrates what I was talking about. The general public does not understand this at all. So the National Guard is the militia. I mean, they celebrate that with the Minuteman and the whole bit. You know, so the reserves does kind of too, but the National Guard belongs to the state. So it is the state's militia, you know, from that legal definition. So the state can employ them, you know, in a certain capacity. Now, just like we were talking about before, if you take a look at what gives them that authority, they're going to be under Title 23, which that is the state. So you might as well say that's the authority that is you know, gives them the you know, I guess the title militia back to the Constitution, and they're going to be used in that capacity. Now, how long is this, and what exactly is the articulated mission? So put yourself in the shoes of some 19, 20-year-old kid who joined the National Guard, got back from training, and now all of a sudden you're standing in a subway in New York City. What are you told to do? Whose direction are you following? And if something goes sideways, does somebody have your back? Now, that's the question. So in order to answer that, and I think we can probably find this somewhere online, can't be classified, but if you find the operations order from the state of Illinois, or I'm sorry, not Illinois, state of New York, that allows this to happen, and that should spell out, kind of like all the way through, what the mission is, the projected time frame, and that type of thing. what's sad about this entire thing is this is all a result of bad practices by the politicians in New York by defunding the police and cutting the numbers and cutting the budget, which started the problem in the first place. So now they're trying to cover up their own mistakes by bringing in the National Guard. I worked with an NYPD officer last year on a deployment in Europe. And he said, hey, I volunteered for this deployment basically because, I want to do the job. He believed in it. However, he was also very happy to be away from the NYPD because of the way they were being treated. So that's, that's indicative right there. You got officers looking for any way, off of what they view as a sinking ship. And that's created that void. That's why the crime started to grow. And, now we are, sitting here with I hope they're not armed yet, military presence there. I think that's more of a show of force. But like I said, all it takes is one or two events before they start considering, arming these folks. And then I don't think maybe we do. Maybe we need to have the reminder of what happened at Kent University back in, 1968, where a bunch of, protesting students were shot and killed. I don't think anybody wants a repeat of that. But hey, it seems like we're kind of forgetting a lot of history, so maybe it's good that we talk about it.
Well, okay. It's definitely good that we talk about it. And that's why I think, and I apologize to both you and Redbeard. I kind of hijacked this tonight because this is the direction I want to go into for Liberty Week, because and that's why the anchor point is, the 4 years ago, we've got to do this and we've got to do that. And look at how easily people went along with similar circumstances, a crisis. There was no legal grounding. Let's just set aside. You can sit and I know there's going to be somebody out there wants to argue with me about the efficacy of a mask or so that we already knew that stuff. Medical science didn't just start 4 years ago. This had already been studied. I remember it was 2019. And the moment we knew the size of the particulate, I was like, yeah, this won't work. I mean, it's just mathematically, this doesn't add up, and the best I ever heard was a customer told me it's like using a tennis net to try to stop a BB. I'm like, yep, that was it. Great analogy. Cause that's literally figuratively, that was a great analogy. I mean, it was like, here's the square of a tennis net and here's the size of the particulate. Yeah. The square of the tennis net representing your mask, of course, but all this information is out there, but look at everything that transpired to crush that and destroyed the soul. And anyone who spoke out against it was labeled X, Y, and Z. And I think we're entering into, this is my, tinfoil hat. And Redbeard, I got to make one of these days, but, because I see the same thing happening here. It's like, we've created a crisis. We've allowed crime to get to this level. Hey, we're from the government. We're here to help, famous, horrible words. And now it is. So I know I am being a little bit tinfoil hat here, but is that what is being set up? Right. So you guys have done a great job of trying to be way more professional and neutral than me and trying to answer this question.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pose it to you as we come up to the halfway break here, the intermission. Could it be something more? Again, you can agree or disagree with me. Could it be something more? Is this nothing more than I'm going to bring Mike D up here again, and somebody else has learned me something, said the same thing, right? So, but here's Mike D. Are they setting all this up to fail so they can bring in more tyranny? That is a legitimate question. Yeah, especially on the heels of the jab bullshit that we just went through. And I'm going to tie this in, Liberty, to the First Amendment as well here during the intermission, because now we couldn't talk about shit then. We still can't talk about shit now because these mechanisms, ScrewTube especially, will shut you down and call you, and people will ridicule you and ostracize you, and you'll lose a job. And there's no one apologizing now that more and more data is coming in, that now that they're finally, people who are promoting the data or compiling the data are being able to punch through those gatekeepers. So gentlemen, as we go into the intermission, agree, disagree with my comment there? You got anything to add to it? Let's come over to Redbeard first, because I'm going to let Patrick take us out on the intermission. See how I did that?
Well, I like that.
Thank you.
I'm just going to quote what James Madison said And he said that the means of defense against foreign danger have always been the instruments of tyranny at home. I brought this quote up before, and inexplicably, yeah, I think the potential and the capacity is there. You're asking an entity that's consumed more and more power as the decades have gone on to all of a sudden relent that grasp on power, or to say, oh, please don't do it this time. Well, I hate to say it, but that's the characterization of an abusive relationship where one party is overtly controlling over the other. In the same breath, I brought up the militia. We as the people constitute an unorganized militia. The National Guard is an organized militia, and there are two types of militia. And so it's important for people to understand that the militia, the Second Amendment, is not there for hunting. It is not there for criminals. It's not there for anything. It is a forceful check upon tyranny, and that's what it was intended for. So when the militia, the organized militia, begins to fail, when the safety nets begin to fail, we need to be prepared as Minutemen in an unorganized manner for when that day comes, to where hopefully it doesn't happen, but to where they decide that they want to take more and more power against whatever little resistance there is left. Yes, invariably, historically, a government will never relent any power. They will only consume more power. And it's historical. That is literally historical precedence. It is, I will say, I would even wager to say that it is status quo for government.
Yeah, you should walk into that situation knowing that that is exactly what government is going to try to do. 100% hands down. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. You give government some power, they're going to try to take it, and they're never going to give it up. Let's come over to Patrick as we approach we're just a little bit past we're trying to do these little intermissions, Patrick. I don't know if you were on when we did this last time, to give everybody who's watching live stream a chance to, and you guys as well, right? I always have to suck it up. I'm the quarterback. I just pee myself. I'm wearing an adult diaper. But, to give everybody a chance to go to the bathroom, grab a little chow. And it gives me a chance to bring up some of the not as important to the conversation, but still salient articles. But Patrick, agree, disagree with me, Redbeard, or you see where we're going, or your comments on that as we kind of come into the break, sir?
Yeah, absolutely agree. And again, I'm glad Mike D's putting some stuff out there, because that's something to keep an eye on, right? Is this being set up to, bring forth more control? Now, all it takes is one or two, these National Guard folks to be injured, and then that could give the justification to say, okay, well, now we need more, or we need to arm people. And that just ratchets up the probability of, firearms being, used against the population. That's very scary. It's just something we all need to be on the lookout for. Back to Redbeard's point, I would say that the militia, it's almost like it's depending on where you live and who you're close with in your environment. You need to really embrace the one-man militia type mentality in your own home, because you see time and time again, different law enforcement agencies, coming on. They definitely did this during the lockdowns, during other large, riot events. Law enforcement is not going to be able to respond to you in any amount of time that's going to, protect you from an actual threat, right? If somebody means to do you harm, or your home harm, or your family harm, that type of thing, you have to, not count on that. So that means starting, embracing the mentality, which to me is that's being an American. What we're doing right now, questioning what's going on, that's American. The folks that just kind of, chuff it off to, hey, yeah, well, I guess that's what they're going to do. It's always what they're going to do. If we're thinking only about what the government's going to do to us, that's got to be a fearful world to live in. You have to think about what options you have available and what capabilities you and, your family and friends have. So that's just, bottom line, I think.
Yeah.
All right, let's go into the intermission here. Redbeard, any comments on that? I've got a bunch, but we'll just save them for the second half. Any comments before we go to intermission?
Really nothing to add on this front other than, a government is always going to be at the disposition of despotism. That's where its natural course always goes whenever it's unchecked. And we were fortunate enough to have founders that had foresight to see this. And so they designed a form of government that they knew that there was always a possibility. They're always disposed to being despotic. They're always disposed to becoming tyrannical, but they gave us mechanisms and tools to prevent this, so long as we were intelligent, educated, well standing in our morals, not debauched in our manners, and capable human beings. We had to be the sentinels of liberty, so to speak. We had to be the people forever watchful. And because we have diminished ourselves to a point to where we are not looking out either for ourselves or for just government or tyranny, this is where we've gotten to. We are, people don't like this, but we have become culpable to some degree in where this government has gotten to. We have allowed too much of this to go on when we've had, and people, I've said this before, and I'll end it on this. People always want to use the line that the Constitution has failed. How can a piece of paper fail itself?
Or how can a piece of paper fail us?
Yeah, exactly.
Unless it was like a write in the rain notebook piece of paper, or it requires piece of paper. Yeah.
The requirement of enforcement starts and ends with us. It always has, and it always will. So, that's where I'm going to leave that.
All right. Hey, so let's jump into the intermission. Just before we do this, just want to roll. Patrick, you still good on some time, or do you got any time constraints coming up?
Yeah, I'm going to probably have to go a break in next 10-15.
Okay, well, that'll work out perfect because we're going to do a quick intermission. So if anyone has to use the restroom, Redbeard, Patrick, do it. I'm going to play actually a little bit of a video. It's not quite a minute long, but it's going to set us up for kind of where we're going in the second half of this. And then if you got to bounce at the very end, because we really are trying to stay with our hour and 30-minute timeline. So, okay. So boys, I'll bring it to myself full screen here. If you guys need to bounce for a second, you know what we do before we do that, just as a joke, I need to get a video or something of just something funny for 2 minutes. Like the old movies, like the popcorn comes out and the cup of soda and they're all wrestling with each other or something like that. A little intermission thing. And we just,
let's all go to the lobby.
Yeah, let's all go to the lobby. Yeah, we just play that for 90 seconds. Everybody, grabs another drink or goes to the bathroom, and then we come back. But we are figuring out that we got to do that. So you guys take a quick break. I'm going to come up to me, and then I'll see you guys here in just 60, 90 seconds. I'm going to play a little video for everybody to the point. So as we're kind of making the transition, you've heard us talking about the New York subway, the role of the National Guard. Is it even legal, both in terms of the titles or authorities that the National Guard operates under, or the military writ large, or any of your government entities for that matter? I mean, in the agency, we have the same considerations, right? Different title, different authority. And that can also then bleed into what type of operation you're trying to conduct. But there's a domestic side to this too. And that's why I was trying to anchor this with the jab bullshit and what was transpiring back then, because that was definitely much more domestic. And it really infringed upon, and as Matt excuse me. Let me just pull this up real quickly. Mike, dude, and I apologize, sir. I mean, I just talked to you just an hour ago. I mean, it's been a long day. But as Mike was pointing out, is this a setup? Is there something else going on? And I'm just, could be wrong, might be right. And if you disagree, and if you say, oh, Mark, you're totally wrong, and I say, well, I think I'm right. Well, only one of us can be correct. I really hope it's you. And I'm the one who's got this all wrong, and I'm viewing this all crab, all sideways. I really, really hope that's the case. But if that's not the case, and I really, as I'm looking at the dots on the wall and the pictures, that are starting to be painted as those dots keep falling in place. I don't think so. And then I'm going to start you. I think I might be right. And I really don't like that at all. I really don't. So here we go. I'm just going to give you a little something. This is what's happening in our state. And as future reference, I've actually reached out to one of these people already. I'll reach out to a couple of these reps. I just found out about this the other day, and I'm just going to play. It's the last 10 seconds of this. This has to do with Minnesota File 4021, which is basically saying that no religious entity can use certain language or certain words, even if that's in. And go watch this video. So it's called, it's Minnesota or MN File 4021. I don't know why it says red. Walter Hudson, I guess because he's a Republican. I guess way to go, YouTube. Label him as a Republican. I don't know if that had to do with anything, but just listen to his last comments here. This is where we are in the state of Minnesota now. So if you hold certain religious beliefs, and that's all the Abrahamic religions, right? This is, in this video, there's representatives from all three Abrahamic religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. They're all speaking out against this. So just listen here.
About politics and culture. That's suppression. That's oppression. That is the choice to be silent because we have allowed ourselves to be cowed and put into a position of fear. And in doing that, we are bowing to the idol. We are deferring to the king, and we are not living faithfully to the Lord our God.
And then this line right here from Reagan. Never more than one generation from extinction. All right, I'm just going to pause it right there as I talk. So I found this to be a very powerful video. It's not very long. I had no idea this was happening in my own state, right? So that's going to kind of tie into the second half because we're going to talk about the media a little bit. Matter of fact, here I'll just do a quick media one. So if you think like, oh, okay, that's just, whatever, Mark, that's just one guy's opinion. Well, it's a bill being passed in our state that's going to basically prohibit you from, if you believe in something from a religious perspective, well, if you do that, well, guess what? You could find yourself in big, serious trouble. And if you think I'm lying, right, or you think I'm joking, look, people may have, recognized this article from just last week. MSNBC panel mocks Americans who think border crisis is a serious issue. I'm not going to play this. I'm not going to give these clowns any time. They went out of their way. This was probably one of the most racist, just out of line, and they cackle and they're laughing about it. And they're making a joke about, the difference between Virginia, where they are, Richmond, north of Richmond type of shit. And West Virginia. And they're basically saying, well, maybe there should be a wall between Virginia and West Virginia. So it's okay for these clowns to sit there and criticize your religious views or your perspectives. But what's going on in Minnesota is if I speak out against that, well, I could find myself in some trouble. So that's one of the articles I wanted to share with you because we're going to kind of, again, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about here we go. The First Amendment side and the Constitution, like that's all I really care about. Our Constitution, which we all operate under, says that I have the right to think this way and say these things and meet with people and congregate. But so it's just kind of funny. It's just really funny to me that we get, this is where the mainstream media is going. So, and I'm not going to play this guy's video. MSNBC declares America could be a dictatorship next year. They're implying that if Trump wins, we'll be a dictatorship. Yet, to the point we've been making throughout this podcast and numerous ones in the past, it's funny. Everything that they are doing, they accuse you of doing. You're a racist, but I can point to I can't even keep up with how much racism we see from quote unquote mainstream media or xenophobia or totalitarianism or tyranny, however you want to phrase that. Yet we're the crazy people because I just want to believe in my Constitution. And all I'm really saying is that we have a set of rules already on the books. Why don't we just execute? Why don't we just follow those rules and execute? If you think that rule is bad, then we have a process, make an amendment, right? So that's it right there. Well, so here's Mike D. Mike D is on a roll here tonight. Mike, good man, sir. You're a good man in so many different ways. Right. Truth is now hate speech. So let's start off the second half here. And I know we got Patrick who's going to have to bounce in a bit. I've got a couple other articles kind of along this line. But I wanted to start with the National Guard because that's really effing scary to me, boys. It's really scary. We're walking, and I'm not even sure that that's even constitutional right now. But what does that matter to the people of New York whose constitutional rights, whose liberties are already being infringed? Redbeard. Can we go back retroactively and give them their liberty back? Can that be done, sir?
They would have to do it
rhetorical. That was actually a real question.
Yeah, I mean, they would have to do it themselves. I mean, in the end of the day, if like there's a longstanding maxim or saying, rights not exercised are rights not kept. And when you have a population of people that are so subdued in their exercising of their rights, then of course the government there has nothing to worry about. They have carte blanche to do whatever they want to do. However, they do become concerned when people start to exercise their rights. They become concerned when people do have an awakening of sorts. So it's going to take an intellectual awakening before anything else. And only until you start to awaken your mind will your body follow. They have to do this themselves. They have to be the main actor in the regaining of their rights. There's never a time where you can't ever get them back. It just becomes exponentially harder over time to be able to do that. And some people would say impossible, but we have to look at history for that. Unfortunately, if we use history as a guide, that may take 100 or 200 or 300 years. It's cyclical. I hope it's much sooner than that, but they have to be the main protagonist in getting their rights back. It can be done, but they also have to understand that if they begin to do that, then there are consequences for that, and you have to be willing to pay the price for those consequences.
Patrick, agree, disagree. Redbeard just kind of threw down some good smoke right there. We could either break contact and run to our next fighting position, or we can assault through. What are you going to do? Agree or disagree?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to agree. The thing that I'm going to build on that might move to the next foxhole, though, is taking a look at what was done, during the lockdowns, right? How legal was any of that stuff? It was all done under emergency powers. And you notice that, a lot of states, the governors, the mayors of big cities, they really embraced that. They locked it down. They stood up, they made these grandiose speeches, but then, they're caught violating their own emergency acts, right? So because, rules for thee, not for me type thing. Now that we're involving, like actual troops into the mix, what was that just kind of like a feeling out scenario? And now, we're gonna test this out. They created the conditions by, defunding the police and basically, there's a war on police, and a lot of good folks said, hey, I'm done with this, or I'm moving, or just getting out of it as soon as I can retire, or just not taking any action on their own, which that's kind of scary in and of itself, right? It's something to be watched, and it's something that could lead to actual. And I really hate to say this word, but like this is where the dissolving of our country and liberty could take place, and our adversaries would really like to see that. Now, there's also acts or actually, bills in other states where they're trying to get it legal so that, non-U.S. citizens can, become law enforcement officers. How scary is that, right? Now you're, it's one thing to have your rights infringed on by, a National Guard member. Now there's some guy that it's not even a citizen that, in a law enforcement capacity that could take your rights and freedom away. I mean, that's really, we've got to keep an eye on this stuff and be as, as the ticker goes by, as vigilant as possible. And, we have to scream out. We've got to be more vocal than the left is right now, because the one thing you got to give those folks is they're in unison and they all go together no matter what.
I didn't plan this. Redbeard, give me just one moment here to Patrick's comments. It's so well done. I've got a reference again, going back to it's called "The Coming of the Police State in America." It's the title of the article. You can find it over on Zero Hedge. I should be sharing this right now. So to Patrick's point, I'm just going to highlight a few things. So boys, I can't see if my beard doesn't look as sexy as it always does, then they'll let me know and I'll correct it. But here, what's the next step? It's probably already here. Mass surveillance and censorship. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is that already here? Plus ever expanding police power. Seems like what we're talking about tonight. This will be accompanied by further population movements. They're talking about people are going to start fleeing cities and states. We're already seeing that happening too. As those with the means to do so flee the city and even the country and leave it for everyone else to suffer. That's exactly what it is. Redbeard and I have talked about this many times. I don't want to leave Minnesota. This is my state. Yet I feel the need to get the hell out of this state. And then the final kind of question here to kind of where you're going at, Patrick, the question that they're posing in the argument or in the article is, are we at the middle stages of total collapse or at the point where the population and people in leadership positions wise up and decide to put an end to the downward slide? So that's it. That's where we are. Liberty Week. I'm kind of bringing that over before I do some of the other media things that are taking place that further back up what that gentleman who wrote that article just wrote. Boys, agree or disagree with me for bringing that up, or that article, the content in general? I'll come over to you, Redbeard, first, and we'll come to Patrick.
Yeah. When you look at the police state, I think it's something that's been cultivating for much longer than I think most people realize. I would say decades ago is when we started to see this uptick in utilizing local law enforcement to carry out the whims of the bureaucrats and the politicians, and basically are their battering ram and their enforcement wing of their unconstitutional policies. This is something that has been going on for a very, very long time. I think when we look at stuff like this, just look at the realm of something like qualified immunity, and you look at how far back that goes. Why is it that they always, law enforcement that perpetrate just atrocious acts and stuff like that, they all run behind qualified immunity? I'm not saying this is every single person in law enforcement, but there is a very large demographic that as soon as they get in trouble and they do some crap that they know they're not supposed to be doing, they scurry around and they jump for that qualified immunity. Look, how long is it going to take until the National Guard in New York gets qualified immunity too? Oh, we're just doing our jobs, so we can't be held liable or responsible for this. Look, as Patrick said, slippery freaking slope, dude. Are they going to start including the National Guard in qualified immunity because they're acting in a policing effort? Let's be honest. I mean,
but I don't know, before we go down that, then that's a great question. But I just want to throw something out that to your earlier point. Well, we already had law enforcement throughout a large swath of America that had no problem arresting you, harassing you. 100%. You could be the only guy on the ocean on your paddle board, but you weren't wearing a mask. So to this point, so I'm just bringing this up, and you can respond, but then I want to come to Patrick, because who's watching the watchers, right? And in other words, and are the men and women in these roles, in these capacities, we are giving them so much delegated authority. They can end people's lives. Yes. And yet they really don't know the Constitution, and they don't uphold the Constitution. And look, and not all of them, again, I'm not trying to make a general, broad sweeping statement, but there are just so many friggin' examples. And how come we didn't see law enforcement writ large throughout the whole country say, yeah, this is totally unconstitutional. I didn't sign up for this, and that's not what I swore an oath to. So Redbeard, I'll let you have a
Well,
request or a comment on that, and then I got to bring this down to Patrick, though.
well, I think you can see the large paradigm shift into this police state coming to a fever pitch, if you will, when they can go into your home with impunity. Oops, wrong address, but we fragged half of your family. Sorry, we're going to run behind qualified immunity.
Yep.
And then if the father or whoever shoots that cop, they get locked up. Who knows? Maybe they get thrown in Leavenworth for 500 years because you shot a cop. Okay, really? Like, this cop broke in my door. He killed half of my family. And you're saying I have no right to self-defense against the mechanisms of the state that are invariably used for their tyrannical purposes. Like,
Slow down.
Yeah.
I gotta slow you down. Dragon, sometimes you just start breathing fire. But Patrick does have to bounce here a little bit. So let's just kind of bite-sized pieces. But I do want to just add to it. Maybe this, if this helps or detracts, Patrick, but Redbeard isn't wrong. I mean, and there are just so many friggin' cases of exactly that. You didn't have any right to do any of this stuff. Yet well, here, I'll just throw this out there. And if people think, well, they should have qualified immunity, who pays all the fines and the legal fees whenever they lose this? Me and you. We do, boys and girls. Us. They don't lose their job. It's not coming out of the department's salary. It's our tax dollars. This is something that should concern.
You're funding your abusers.
Yeah, God, there's a little note. What is that? Isn't that one of the signs that you're in a abusive relationship when you keep supporting your abuser, your tormentor? All right, Patrick. Give me a quick sit rep because so I can plan this last couple minutes. How much time you got left?
I probably got about maybe 10 minutes because I got to get rolling.
Then you roll with this, and then you and Redbeard can duke it out.
Yep.
Okay. So I'll just tell a quick story. And law enforcement, just like any other organization, makes mistakes, and sometimes they make big mistakes. Real quick, just to kind of ride the coattails of that story. I was on a SWAT team. I won't say where we were, but we get a call that, hey, there was a kid that had stolen a car, had a firearm. He's inside of a house. He was seen by somebody across the street doing work on a roof. Okay, so the local police show up. They get a perimeter around the house, and then they call the SWAT team. And we show up, and it goes on hours and hours and hours. Well, grandma shows up, who owns the home, and says, hey, look, I don't care what you do with my grandson. He's probably got it coming. Just don't tear up my house. Well, long story short, over the course of like 4 or 5, 6 hours, because now there's media presence there, there's all this pressure to make decisions. They decide, hey, we're gonna pull the security door off the front with an armored vehicle. We're gonna break the glass at the basement. We're gonna throw gas in the house. So basically, end up trashing our house. They go in, clear the house. Decide, somebody says, hey, wait a minute, I thought I heard movement. Maybe he's up in the attic. So they decide to throw a flashbang grenade into an attic. I don't know how what you guys have in attics up in Minnesota, but sometimes there's that pink stuff that's a little bit flammable for insulation, and they caught the roof on fire. Had to call the fire department in there. We had to make sure that the police cars got moved out of the way. Long story short, the house was completely trashed, and the kid wasn't even there. So all that damage is going to go to insurance, and I hope to God that woman sued and ended up being covered by the city that we were in. But just horrific. And this, I'm very pro law enforcement, but like when mistakes like this are made, they're pretty catastrophic, right? So so that's something to always be mindful of, and that's just during day-to-day like type of operations, right? Now, one thing that's a little bit more scary, and this is coming from the intel side. So since 9/11,
real quickly, if you don't mind, just a quick interjection, because I like there was power in that. I don't think you put enough weight in it.
Okay,
that shit happens, and that's just the basic benign, day-to-day grind type of stuff. And we have these issues. I don't think you could stress that enough. So
yeah, that's right.
You think this is going to work out perfectly and swimmingly at these other more complicated, second and third degree order effect. Come on, man. We have a hard time getting this right there on the ground, on the scene of the things that are more realistic, to Patrick's point, right?
Yeah.
So, sorry, Patrick, continue. Sir.
No, well, and just to kind of follow off what you just said, I mean, we used to talk about this. Everybody has this Hollywood version of the CIA that everything is this like, this big crazy machine that does all these great and wonderful things, and it's completely flawless. And, everybody's like Jason Bourne, but Hey, it's I used to the way I'd explain it to people is it was like, okay, you got Jason Bourne on one end of the spectrum, and then you've got Newman from Seinfeld on the other end, and a lot of times that little needle would lean a lot more towards Newman than it would Jason Bourne. So and Newman being the guy that wouldn't deliver the mail in the rain, right? So that's concerning. However, let's go back to I wanted to make another point. Since 9/11, there's been a huge, joining of forces in the name of terrorism. So it kind of goes back to what I think Mike D said, everything in the name of safety, right? And when the Patriot Act came on board, I think that was a little bit of the downfall to liberty, in the country, because it was in the name of your safety, right? So the intelligence community got together. They formed the Joint Terrorism Task Forces. And that went all the way into like the states, and the states started forming fusion centers with Department of Homeland Security money. And there's just constant like flow of information back and forth, which, if it's for legitimate terrorism, I'm all about it. But a lot of times there's misunderstandings. Yeah. Folks are just ignorant of what terrorism looks like. And, every single Muslim was a bad guy. And, it's like, okay, that's not the case. So, well, what proof do we have? Fast forward to today, and I'm going to encourage everybody, if you guys haven't seen it either, to watch. There's a documentary on Netflix called The Octopus Murders, and it goes all the way back to like the Reagan days. And it talks about how our government has these relationships with other governments and organizations outside. Well, one of the concerns, and this has been a discussion over the past couple of weeks I've been having with friends where I work, is the use of the Five Eyes, which the Five Eyes is it's an intelligence coalition of the U.S., Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. Our intelligence services work very closely together. So while it's illegal for the CIA and NSA to collect information, to actively collect information on U.S. citizens, well, what if they're not the ones doing it? What if we've got the Brits or the Canadians collecting information on us, and then they share it with our folks through classified means that nobody's ever going to know about? Because I'm a big proponent of the Freedom of Information Act, filing those things. That's something that that's how a lot of this stuff comes to light, and people just don't know what to ask for. So I would highly recommend forming coalitions of people, and I think the ACLU was designed to do this. But file these Freedom of Information Acts to find out what's what. I mean, you could do that if the New York National Guard doesn't release the operations order on what's going on up there. That could be a FOIA because it's not classified.
Well, I'd love that actually. And that was a great point with, look, you should be able to FOIA. Well, you know what though? Honestly, sir, I guarantee they're going to probably put some classification on it, they'll find the lowest level classification so it can't go public. But you're absolutely right. But right now, before people wise up, that should be FOIA information, Freedom of Information Act information. Matter of fact, it might even be on the New York National Guard, their homepage, because I'm sure they have a website, right? Yep. And if they're going to deploy soldiers, then, correct me if I'm wrong here, Patrick. I know it's been a little while for me, but there's usually a notification, a deployment letter, and part of that might actually be the op order that goes along with it. Because
once they get the ground, yep, that's right.
Yep. Right. So I was going to say, so that probably can't be kept under wraps, no matter how much they want to try.
Because part of the operations order, part of that operations order is the from the JAG, the Judge Advocate General, giving them the authority, and that commander the authority to issue the orders that those soldiers are going to follow. A lot of the soldiers probably have the op order on their phone, or maybe, I don't know if they gave hard copies or not, but that's the way things used to work for us. We used to get a copy of that before we go off on missions. And, we didn't usually carry it around with us, but you had to memorize your portion of it very strongly. But the one thing that wasn't really emphasized is hey, what gave the commander the authority to begin with to issue this thing? So,
well, and I just want to throw this in there before my addled brain forgets. It of course, it's public knowledge, because so many of the soldiers need to provide that written documentation to their employers.
Yep.
Because hey, you can't, because again, I'm sure New York has its own law, but hey, I'm being activated. I'm being motivated. I'm being mobilized, activated. And here's the no shit legal document that is giving you, my employer, the notice that we're taking your employee because he or she is going to go do this thing for us. And if you fire them, you're going to be in bad doo-doo, right? So you're absolutely right that there's no way they could keep that classified. That's got to be all over. Now, to what degree though do they bring in the details on that? Not 100% sure. They could just simply cite some, made up, New York code or something, but I'm having a hard time finding where the Constitution authorizes them to search, just any citizen they want on a train platform, a metro platform.
Same.
I'm not seeing that.
Gents, I'm going to have to break. So,
all right. Final comments before you bounce. And that's actually pretty good timing. We're doing a pretty good job tonight. So let's give you final comments here, Patrick. And again, thank you as always for joining us. And
appreciate it, brother.
Yeah. And I really, really wanted you to be here tonight to get this, because liberty, I'm not sold on this. And just like you, I used to be all kinds of pro law enforcement, and kind of having my eyes kind of unfortunately like peeled back and stuck open with toothpicks right now. Like, what the fudge is going on here? Patrick, final comments, sir.
Yeah, just final thoughts is making sure that we always remain vigilant and watch this stuff and question it, hold people accountable. And I think you hold them accountable by having communication, with your elected leaders, depending on who those folks are. Maybe some of those are the ones that caused it, but also, speaking out against it, filing FOIA requests, getting the answers, finding out what's going on, because if it's left unchecked, that's where things start to grow. It's like, a little bit here, a little bit there, give somebody an inch, they'll take a mile. And that's proven to be true. So going back to what Redbeard said to start this, is like, once they get power, they really don't want to relinquish it. And I think that's true with anything. So.
No, you failed me. We talked about this the other day. On that same note, you just said, you got to back me up. Dude,
okay.
You
know where you're going.
Yep, please, because you just said exactly that. So I know there's somebody who watches this like, oh, Mark used to be in the CIA. Patrick was in this. Once CIA, always CIA. That's bullshit. That's like saying, that no one ever has a second chance. No one ever can, be better. You might as well just say once a criminal, always a criminal. Then why are we even locking people up? Then, if they're always going to be a criminal, then why don't we just kill them by your own logic? That's just ridiculous. Patrick, though, but I know you know what I'm getting at.
Oh,
here,
I know.
All right.
and it's
Take
true.
Take a note on that and then go eat some food with your family.
No, absolutely. And that's true. So like, after 9/11, they came up with the Patriot Act. Initially, hey, everybody's like still got that fervor from the attacks, and you want to see, bad people rolled up pretty quick. But because that took so many freedoms and gave the government so many basically unchecked powers, with FISA warrants and that type of thing, that hasn't really ever been relinquished. And I think this was when we were at CIA. We were talking about this, and I was talking about something, it was classified, had to do with getting some information somewhere, and you brought up, you went contrarian on me and said, well, why would you say that? These people are still U.S. citizens, and then the light went on. So that's how, I've always been, a supporter of the Constitution and liberty, but sometimes folks get caught up in, hey, here's what we're doing. It's my day to day, and they lose sight of that fact. So people in the intelligence community, people in law enforcement, people in the military, you lose sight of that. And then sometimes you just go along with, hey, whatever's thrown out there. Even if you're in those capacities and you're not asking questions, is this a lawful order? And show me the law that backs this up. You might be the one that's doing the oppressing. And, hopefully you don't fall into that realm. But no, total kudos, Mark, because you woke me up back then and I said, okay, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, what the hell are we doing? And that just kind of changed my perspective on that stuff.
And I just wanted to include that because it's not about me, but it's a shared history that Patrick and I have, and it's about us. It's the same thing. It's the soda straw effect. We all can fall victim to this. And I'm not saying that he did. It's just sometimes you just need that other person, and we should always have a mechanism by which there is that other person that says, hey, should we really do this? Does that make sense? Again, I've told the story, here's a surreptitious entry team. They're on night 5 of trying to get, and it's not that easy to make a key. There's a technique, and then in night 3 or night 5, one guy just grabs the window and opens it up. And it's like, everybody's like, oh, son of a bitch. We could have just went through the window the first time. You just need to take that step back, because you're probably looking at the problem or the question or the from your own soda straw. That's why I love
Yeah.
that story, of our mutual time there. But
yeah, well, I
All
tell
right,
you what,
Patrick.
I'll end at this. I'll say
Okay.
the one thing that was good about the Intel side of the house is like they appreciated people questioning things, right? Depending on your group, we tried to fight groupthink as much as we could. So somebody that offered like an outside opinion or could give you a sanity check on just like something Mark just mentioned. That's welcome. Now some of these communities, law enforcement side, military side, groupthink is the order of the day, and that's where things get scary because you might have some folks with the right answers or that want to question it and they're just afraid to do it. That's where real courage begins. It's not on the battlefield. It's actually questioning, sometimes your own organization on the legality and the logic of what you're doing. So have that courage to do it.
Yep.
God bless you for bringing that up. That was awesome.
It's a great point.
Seriously, great point. Thank you for bringing that up, sir. All right, my good man. As always, fix bayonets. We'll see you the next time. And by the way, you still got a couple pouches or something for the kid. If
all right,
so does there. Just don't know, do whatever. Whatever.
I got
all right, we'll talk to you later, man.
All right, gents. Adios.
Make sure you blame Redbeard if the family's pissed off you. They kind of know me, but they don't know him. So just blame Redbeard. Don't blame me.
Okay. All right. You'll be there.
Right. Thanks. See you, man. All right. Redbeard. So Patrick is just, I always love having him on. Hey, so we are at I almost said a minute 25. We're at an hour 25. You have been chomping. I've seen you scrambling to write notes. How about we just do this? Because I've got a couple other things to bring up, but they're really not all that important. Well, one of them would be because it's a glimmer of hope, but otherwise, why don't you just take the helm and just where you want to go for, like, what do you think? Let's wrap this up in 5-10 minutes. What do you got?
Yeah, we could do a wrap up.
Right.
I guess
you drive then, sir. You're driving.
Yeah, so I just kind of want to put out there too, amidst this whole conversation, this one subject really did kind of monopolize this episode, but I'm not disappointed because it is a very real threat to our safety and our security as individuals in this country. The threat of the military on home soil and the using of law enforcement to usurp liberties and rights of people and becoming the battering ram of tyrants. This is a very real situation, something that really is a touchy subject for many people. You might have individuals that they say they're for liberty, but then it's like, when you start to bring up the realm of accountability for law enforcement or government in general, or checks and balance on the military, or checks and balance on the intelligence community and stuff like that, then you have people that start to, they start to stumble and stammer and whoa, it's like, but this and this and this, and it's, look, these are all instruments and tools that historically have always been part of the downfall of liberty. And it's something we should take very, very seriously. It's why the founders were so opposed to standing armies. That the way the military is described in the Constitution is to raise armies in a time of need, not to have a permanent standing army, but to have the militia of the states, an organized militia of the states, to be kind of that bulwark against these things, but not to have a national or federalized military, so to speak. There's so many inherent dangers with that, notwithstanding the local issues with law enforcement. And there's so much to go on that we're going to have to bring up again and again. But one thing I want to kind of leave off here is, Theophilus Parsons was another individual invested and integral to the founding of our country. He was one of the founding personalities and fathers of this country, and a pretty wise person. And one of the things that he said is, an act of usurpation is not obligatory, it's not law. And what he means by that is, when you have a law or legislation that usurps your rights and liberty, you are not obliged to follow it. There's nothing that requires you to bow down and become subject to usurpation. Because when you do, you become a subject. You're no longer a free, liberty oriented individual. That these things are meant to break down those things and to make you into a subject and a slave. And I'm here to tell you, slavery is very real, just not in the capacity that it was.
Just real quick interruption, because just to your point, it not only does it break you down, but you are by de facto, you are giving legitimacy to that unconstitutional or that online. Yeah, I just wanted
very
to throw
much
that
so.
in.
Yes,
yeah, continue.
And, you know, and you know, people like to use the word slavery, and I would argue that there's many forms of slavery. I would argue that mental slavery is the worst form, because oftentimes when you're in mental slavery, you don't even realize it until it's too late. And you know, everything that you adhered to, like unjust or usurping forms of law, have been around for so long at that point that you're kind of stunned, if you will. You're shocked. It's a shock to the system. Another form of slavery is economic slavery, which we're also experiencing today, where, you know, you used to have family units to where one parent was able to stay at home, the father would go out and work and provide a life and a living for his family. And now in my opinion, one of the worst things that ever happened was for both parents to have to go out and work. So that's less time to be with your kids. And with and through the education system, you're now subjecting your kids to indoctrination and government schooling. Thereby, you're training a generation via the Department of Education and public schooling, not on moral basis or a liberty-oriented basis, but to mold the next generation of people just to wake up and go to work and come back home and do it all over again. That's how you destroy liberty long term.
I did not know you were going to bring that up. You just hit that was a Sammy Sosa, like over center field at Wrigley. Like that was out on the street. You crushed it right there, my good man. That's exactly, come on. I mean, like, I know people would say, oh, you guys are just crazy. Really? Look around. This is exactly what is transpiring. This is exactly how this slow pendulum of your death, of your defeat, has been the arc of it. That's the arc it's been on for you. You're absolutely right.
I'm going to end on this. I've said this numerous times. The future is with our children. We have a responsibility to teach our children how to be good, moral, upstanding people, to be service to others, and to uphold the principles of liberty and stewardship, not only to each other, but to our country. And if we're going to have a future, and our future is in those children, unfortunately, we have outsourced our future to people that don't care about your children. They will hurt your children. They will do things to your children, not always physically, but mentally, that will not only get them to turn against you, but to usurp you and turn you in, as happens in Orwell, where if you say the wrong thing, all a child has to do today is tell a teacher, and you'll have the cops at your door for something that maybe perhaps was a total misunderstanding. It's not saying there aren't bad situations, but look at how they augment and they use your own children against you to get you thrown in prison, to get you in trouble, to get you fined, or whatever the case is. We have to fight for our posterity.
Evil has used the education amongst other edifices, other arms of, like, if you want to go into the columns, like first column, but other institutions to supplant the parent, supplant the individual, supplant your liberty, your religious freedoms. And again, I highly recommend it's Minnesota 4051, I think it is, or 4021. Go back to the beginning of the video, find that video, and listen to what's happening in our state. And then Redbeard, to your point, my final kind of little comment to that, having to do with children and the educational system. The fight is ours for their future. Like, I don't think we've ever said this. I don't think I've ever said this on the podcast. Redbeard and I talk about this all the time. I'm giving you a glimpse inside of my, my crazy brain. Like, I've screwed up and I've kind of been led astray. Like, I think, I can sit there and say I've done all kinds of cool things and I can be proud of that. You know what I've never done? I've never had a family. I've never raised a child. And that to me is like the most valuable lesson and the most difficult lesson that you can be presented with. Because, at the end of the day, when your child, he or she reaches the age of 18, you turn to society and say, here's my child. He or she is worthy of entering into society and to be a meaningful member of it. I got sucked up into the drug of being a cool guy, so like that's, okay, that is what it is. And I'll regret that. But to your point, Redbeard, and this fight that we're in right now, boys and girls, this isn't about us. It's not about my generation. It's not even about Redbeard's generation. It's about the children. It's about the children. We're going to lose this fight. I hate to say it. Redbeard, maybe I shouldn't have said this. We're going to lose this fight. I highly doubt I'll see my military retirement. I highly doubt I'll see my, Social Security. The world, no matter whoever wins this next election, is just going to get fucking crazy. Like, we're in this fight, not for us to be like, the guys raising the flag on Suribachi at Iwo Jima. We're doing this so that those kids today will be the ones who raise the flag on Suribachi. It's a metaphor. Don't anyone bash me and say I hate Japan. I love Japanese culture. Redbeard can attest to this. He's heard too much about my, whatever. But I'm just trying to say this fight, we have to be in this fight, and it's not for us. It's for those who come behind us.
It's for our posterity, brother.
Yep.
I mean,
it is for us. And those words were so solemnly written for probably those same friggin' reasons.
Yeah. And it's, we have to take care very much of our involvement in our children's lives. Like this, whether you see it or not, there has been an environment created by not just this administration. I would argue administrations back to probably the 60s, maybe the late 50s, where they have created a situation, again, where you're bringing parents farther away from their children. You're creating that divide. And now you have the babysitter or the nanny state looking after your children. Look, we have to be invested. And I know that's easier said than done. But look, it's not, and this might be somewhat of a diatribe, so forgive me, but your phone is not a parent. Your TV is not a parent. A gaming system is not a parent. Get your, I don't care what it is that you necessarily get your children involved in, if it's sports or just outdoors, or if it's some type of like science club or something like that, right? Like, get them involved in something where they can accrue good interpersonal communication. They get to know how to deal with people. They learn skills. They learn how to be, a servant to others. They can expand their minds. They allow your kids to go out and play and do things that children should do, because it's one of the greatest capacities for learning that we'll ever have. It's one of the most unnatural things in the world, is sitting in a classroom listening to some know-it-all jabber on about something that they really don't know at all. It's so counterproductive the way that we approach children today, and we have to do better as adults, as mentors, as people that are trying to bring them into a world to where they do have a lot of challenges ahead of them now, probably more today than ever before. I was fortunate enough to grow up in the time that I did. Mark, you're fortunate enough to grow up in the times that you did, and I saw the back end of that time. But today, dude, children have an uphill climb, and when you have parents that aren't available, so to speak, and they're not there and they're not involved, you're doing such a disservice to not only your children but also to the community as a whole. Because
and future generations, like your future prosperity, like your future longevity. I mean, like,
well,
you're cutting off your nose despite your face at that point. Yeah, man, it just is.
So,
hey, we're at a minute 38. I did that intentionally. I did it intentionally.
I like it. I like it.
Minute, hour and a half. Hey, I do have one thing to bring up, and then we're gonna try this again. Because Chris was so great to let us use their music. I'm gonna try to do the music with your outro.
Perfect.
Last time it was a little bit loud on my side, so I had to stop it. I'm still playing with that, but I just want to say that there is still hope right now. I just want to share one last thing. And it's also a little bit of, you know what? Honestly, I'm not even going to do it. Redbeard, where do you want to go with this? Forget the last thing I was going to do. It was kind of stupid anyway. It was just kind of like, you can see me smiling like, like it was kind of dumb. But so let's skip that. What do you think? Should we wrap this up, my good man?
Yeah, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, well, we got part two. That's actually,
two,
that's 7 right there. We
part
have 2. Part 2 on Thursday. We're gonna have
which is gonna be a banger, hopefully. So
well, let's not jinx it. Knock on wood, don't jinx us. We got to get everybody there first, but it'll be good. Continue with Liberty Week. Redbeard, why don't you give us your final comments and then take us out? I'm gonna try to make the music work. Neon Dead. Yeah, but if the volume is wrong, I'll skip it. But go ahead, sir.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I'm just gonna end on this. Like, dude, like there's always hope. It's not always apparent. But hope is there, and sometimes we have to be the ones to bring about that hope. And I said this last week and Be the Difference week. But dude, like, if you just take 5, 10, 15 minutes to sit down and talk with somebody, especially somebody that you've never met in your entire life, and sometimes you just need to sit down and let people just talk, man. Like, just get to know people, let people talk, listen to people's stories and try and help where you can, be a servant to others, because that in and of itself is where a lot of that hope is. And I mentioned this before, but that 5 minutes that you give to somebody, dude, it could save somebody's life. Seriously, you really could save somebody's life. So on that note,
all right, I brought myself back. I was hoping I could have a view with just you and then the music, if that was going to make it easier. I had to remove myself from the stage. So on that note, Redbeard, as you just said, let's just go ahead.
Yeah. Now look.
Loud?
Yeah, it sounds good.
That's too loud?
Good. No. Nope.
Let's bring it down a little bit so people can hear your awesome words.
Yeah.
All right, take us out, my brother.
So, look, the flame of liberty shall not and will not ever be extinguished so long as there are good people that are willing to support and defend it. And that means every single one of you. Go forth into this world, be the hope that you seek, build that hope for others, be good to each other, and take the time to listen to somebody, because you might just save their life. If you want something to change, be that change. Don't wait for change to happen, because it may never come. You have to be pivotal in creating the change and creating the better future that you want for yourself, but more importantly for your kids and the future posterity. So with that being said, thank you for joining the Mission Critical podcast tonight. We greatly appreciate your patronage, and we hope to see you on Thursday at 1800 Central Standard Time.
Rock and roll, boys and girls. Thank you very much. And we got a little, I just got to end with that. Zulu Link just gave us a nice, bicep. And then he gave us a little, I don't know if that's the Ronnie James, but that's definitely like a little.
I like it.
All right, I like it. Everybody. We'll see everybody Thursday, 1800 Central Daylight Time. And we hopefully will have some special guests. I think you guys are going to really like it. We're moving that direction. Redbeard, as always, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Again, this gets me so fired up. All right. After action review in a couple seconds over the phone.
Sounds good.
All right. Everybody else, see, we're serious about this. We actually talk to each other afterwards. There, a little inside baseball. We talk to each other afterwards and say what went right, what went wrong, and we figure out how to improve it. And we're not really doing a good job because it's still our faces in front of the camera. So we're not, we're not addressing the worst part of the podcast. All right, everybody, thank you very much for watching us. Be the difference. Be the difference.
Every single day.
The resistance. All right. Next time.